we can do something. We have agency. I think when we think that agency now has gone, I think that's when it truly gets dark. But we can do something. We can resist, and we can take care of each other. And so I try to tell folks, when I speak at different places, do what you can, where you can, however you can.
No, it's not. We know it's not me.
Well,
because of my
I don't think it's me
amazing
either.
upload speeds.
No, your upload speeds are ridiculous. You have a gig upload speed? That doesn't make any sense.
That's what it says. You want me to screenshot it and send it to you?
No, I believe you, April. Okay. Gee. Happy Friday, I guess. Let's roll the stinger and restart. Oh, friends, hello. Happy Friday. Good to be with you. Wait, is my stuff muted?
I can hear you.
It's my stupid setting came up. Okay, Andrew, first off, Andrew Whitehead, good to have you back on the show as we do every month. Tracking Christian Nationalism. You're an amazing sociologist doing great work. Amazing books, American Idolatry. You know all the stuff, friends. Pick up the stuff in the books. Okay.
Thank
Andrew,
you.
I have a story to tell you. I am so discombobulated. Is that even a real word? I don't care if it is or isn't. I'm going to use it. So 2 weeks ago, April and I were at Theology Beer Camp having a grand old time. My partner, Sarah, was away on her friend's vacation. Everything was good. She gets back. Sarah gets pneumonia. So I'm already out of sync for a week. Then she gets real sick. She gets out of sync. I mean, she has 104-degree fever at one point. It's a whole thing. We have to go to the ER. Okay, so last week was a total wash because, you're not in your rhythms. Like, your rhythms are totally messed up. And then my computer, my Mac Mini M2, like right before I have to record a pretty important video, the one that we released on Wednesday, 2 days ago now, it just takes a crap. It just totally will not boot up. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. All my stuff is on there. Now, I did have a backup, but it was from May of this year because I didn't realize that I didn't have my hard drive plugged into my Mac Mini because I have every single port used up for everything else, for the camera and the mics. And if people can see what I'm looking at, it's a spider web of just cables everywhere. So
I should start playing my violin.
Yes, no, please, that would be great. It gets worse though. So then, at this point, I have to use my MacBook Pro to kind of become my new desktop to hobble on over and make all the content work, right? But obviously, we're recording today, and that requires a lot of prep. So I had to restore my Mac Mini from Time Machine Backup, which took 14 hours to do, aka like an hour ago. So I've been trying all morning to like reset all my settings and make sure that everything works. Can you please pity me?
I'm sorry, man. That sounds horrible.
Thank you. That's all I want. I just want some damn empathy.
Do you need a hug? And
yes. And I need more
you need a blueberry coffee.
I got it right
here.
here.
There you go. Just take a nice swig of that. Yep.
I just want to say too, with how blurry I am,
why
and
is
Andrew,
your video so blurry?
But this is so validating to me because the few times I've been blurry, you were like, "Figure it out." Like, well, that's on you.
Okay.
And now I know it's not me.
Okay. Whoa. That is not what I said. Let the record. I was not like, figure it out, April. That's not what I said.
You said it much nicer, but you definitely implied that it was a me problem and not on your end because you.
Well, I don't think it's on my end.
No, I know, but I think it's the program. For whatever reason, it's blurring your guess.
But it only really happens with you. I record all the time with people. Never have that issue. Well, now I'm in with Andrew.
Right, but I don't always. We don't always have the issue either. It's random.
Yeah.
I will say this is the only software that it is getting clearer. It knows we're talking about it.
Slowly.
This is the banter the people come to.
Yeah,
the
they're
Friday
like, "Oh my
for.
God, get to the election."
No, I don't want to get to the election, April. I don't want to do it. This is it. This is the last Friday recap before the election. Okay, let's just do a little temperature check. We'll start with. Oh, you voted? Did you vote early?
I'm gonna go vote today. I think.
Yep. Voted yesterday.
Have you guys noticed how 4 years ago, MAGA was like, voting early is gonna steal the election. You don't vote early. Like, we don't want people voting early. You vote on election day. And now here we are 4 years later, and a lot of them are like, make sure you vote early. Make sure you vote early. It's wild. It's
all the
returns.
All the returns are showing that it's about equal across Republicans, Democrats, Independents. Republicans are out in force voting early, much more than in 2020. So
it's almost
it has
wild
shifted.
As the quality of both of your cameras going in and out. Like, that's how wild it is.
It's not our camera, though, as we've already established.
No, you're right. It's got to be something else. I'm just very frustrated because I like being able to figure out problems, and I like having a quality.
I know.
You know, this is for YouTube, so we all want it to look good. I want you to look good, April. You to look good, Andrew. And it's just me right now. It's just kind of like the Tim show. I look crystal clear.
It does feel a little Tim focused.
Yeah.
Like, quite literally, you're the only one in focus.
I can't figure this out. I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I'm like, lower quality, standard definition. Guys, I
look idea. Like Minecraft right now.
I know. Seriously. Like, how can we have a serious conversation? You can barely make out that I have eyes.
I know. Do you think it's worth, like, both of you, like, hopping out and hopping back in real quick just to see? I mean, I'm just trying to think of whatever. Is that going to mess
up your recording?
No. I mean, nothing that we can't fix in post. I'm just like, I'm closing down all my programs. I'm making sure like nothing is like stealing bandwidth. I just don't understand.
I mean, I can come out and come back in if you want me to try.
Yeah, I mean, it might not hurt. My mom's
I'm just glad that this is an us problem now and not a me problem, because I've been trying to figure this out for months on my own.
All right, why don't you guys hop out and hop back in, and we'll see if we can get this thing to work. Okay, that looks better.
It does look better. Good old reboot.
Weird. That's so weird. And then as I was closing down my windows, I closed down every single video we had open to play for the show. So now I'm reopening all of them one by one.
It's election season. We're all just drowning in anxiety.
Oh my God. I mean, I have gotten, I'm not sure about you all, I've gotten so many messages from people who are like, I'm having panic attacks. I'm like, I understand. You know, like, I think people, I don't know. I mean, Andrew, you are the one who is probably the most data conscious because you track this stuff like on a sociological level. I try my best to be like, I'm not attempting to sound hyperbolic. I'm not trying to scare people into voting, you know, not for one team over the other. But I feel like I just keep reading the data. I just keep seeing what they're saying, and I'm like, I don't know how else to communicate this for you. Like, this is a really intense election, and it's a very vital one, I think, for the future of the country. But do you think that's kind of hyperbolic? Because I don't want to sound right-wing, sky is falling, if there's no reason to really think so.
I don't think that is hyperbolic because, one of the books that has been really helpful to me is How Democracies Die. And in that book, they talk about the guardrails of democracy. And a couple of the key points that they make is that in a functioning democracy, you can have political opponents, but it's key that you recognize your political opponent's right to exist, right, and to participate. And so if you can do that, you can have a functioning democracy. Or if you view, once you start talking about your political opponents as enemies and they don't have a right to participate, they should be squashed or kicked out. That's where you see the guardrails of democracy falling down. Or conceding elections, right? Saying, we lost and we're going to try better next time, or we won, and allowing your political opponent to then still participate, right? Those are how functioning democracies work. And in 2016, Trump said he probably wouldn't respect the results of the election, and that was our warning sign. And then in 2020, we saw what happened with not wanting to willingly give up power, and he's continued that. Republicans have gone all in. And so this isn't about policy, like Republicans and conservative economic principles and different things like that. They have a right to exist. They have a right to vote. They have a right to, push for policies they agree with in the public sphere. But when we get to the point where they're saying we actually don't even want to play by democracy's rules and we don't respect the right of other people to exist in this democracy, to participate, that's where I think that is sky is falling. This isn't an issue about policy anymore. This is an issue about our actual political process. And that's where we are right now. So I don't think it is hyperbolic. I do think it does matter. Now, say it comes to pass that they win and all that, we could talk about, well, what do we do next? Right. And I think there it isn't as though, we could talk more about that, but I do think that's what's at stake. We've gotten to the point where one political party does not believe that their opponents have a right to participate and exist in this political system. And that's huge. That's a huge issue.
Yeah, Andrew, I mean, I appreciate you saying that. It kind of makes me feel better that I'm not being crazy or that I'm not like lying to people, because, I think April and I think about the platform that we have, the folks that trust us to give them reliable information, and we don't want to give them propaganda. I'm not trying to sound like a sycophant for the Democratic Party, because I'm just not a Republican. That's not how I think about what I'm trying to do. And so it's helpful because I just think at this point, so sometimes we cannot see the importance of the, sometimes I feel like we can't always see the historical moment that we're in. And I think the work of you and many other folks doing the data digging and like the sourcing and the footnoting help us kind of better realize, like, no, we actually are in a pretty unprecedented time, or maybe it's it's one of those more uncommon times where what we're facing as a country is two very different visions for America, and one tends to be much more exclusive than the other one, as far as we can tell.
Yeah. I mean, we need healthy opposing parties, right? I think it'd be better if we had more than two.
Yeah.
Right. But we probably will never have more than two. We need two healthy parties. And right now we don't have that. So it isn't about partisanship at this point. It's like, I would love to have a functioning Republican Party that wasn't giving into this type of authoritarianism, which it hasn't in the past. And so, I think in that sense, we have to look at it through kind of clear eyes. Now, do we give up hope, right, and give in to cynicism? I think that's where we have to look clearly at the threats, but then what do we do from there? And I think that's where the work that you all do can be really helpful to folks, where I think, in a sense, right, the darkness wins when we just give up and we just give in to cynicism. And I don't think we can do that either. Even if this election doesn't turn out the way that maybe we would want, it doesn't mean that all hope is lost, or it's going to get bumpy for sure. But what do we do from there? I think that's where we have to then, start looking to each other and moving forward the best that we can. And we could talk more about that, but I think that's just as important, because I think there's resistance is key as well, right? With whatever might come, and having hope is kind of, a brave step to take. And I think one we have to do and try to move forward on. Because when we just give up, I think that's when the battle is over, I guess, in that sense. So anyways,
we still have to see what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. And regardless of it, Beecher and I think I don't know anyone who's not paying attention who isn't just a bundle of anxiety about this election. Because if you've been paying attention, you know what's at stake this election. But I try to tell myself and just remember, like, regardless of what happens, there are a lot of us. There are more of us who want to save democracy and see a thriving, follow the Constitution and see a thriving country than there are of the people wanting to burn it all down and, just put a fascist in power. And, we'll figure it out. We'll try to figure it out. We're not alone. And usually our worst fears are not the reality.
Yeah.
Wow.
I agree.
Usually, unless it's January 6th.
That could have been worse too, though.
It could have been worse.
It could have been a lot better.
Well, and two, I think, April, along those lines, we look at what happened in Springfield, Ohio, right? Like Trump and J.D. Vance taking this, something that was rooted in a complete lie and fabrication. They threw it on the fire, just stoked the fires. But we look at that community and what happened there. Like, everybody rallied around the Haitian immigrant refugee community. because I think to that point, April, there are more folks who want to live at peace with their neighbors. And I think this movement that wants to just continually divide and hate and see everybody as the enemy, it does have a lot of momentum and power right now, but it will fail. Like it is going to fail at some point. And, you know, the love that we have for each other and for neighbors, I think there are more people that will try to defend and protect the vulnerable than otherwise. And I think that's where we all come in then too, right? So for me, you know, with all the privilege that I have, I'm going to need to in this next moment and continually speak for the vulnerable, defend those that movement's coming after, because they won't necessarily come after me right away, right? It's going to be for other groups. And so I do have hope and believe that, there's more of us, like you said.
Yeah. Get out and vote. We still have a few days. If you haven't voted, go vote. And just for some hope, I do know I have some family members that live in a swing state who have one who never voted and one who's never voted Democrat because they're diehard Republican and voted for Trump, both of which voted for Kamala. So I do think there are a lot of people who are Republicans. Like I heard a family member say that they voted for Kamala in order to save the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Because it's not the Republican Party anymore.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we? Yeah, I'm so annoyed.
I know,
by so
Tim.
many things at one time.
He's out.
No. I'm here. I was looking. This is so unprofessional, but whatever. We'll keep it in the recording. I was looking at like my data usage in real time to be like, is it like why? I can barely even see you two, and I'm just like this is the straw that has broken the camel's back, right? It's like we're facing an unprecedented election. I'm so furious at MAGA and the white evangelicals who support this nonsense. My computer broke, you know, and like now on top of that, I can't even see my two friends on camera before the election. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, but it is what it is. I'm just very distracted. Maybe what we could do then to give us a breather is to get even more bombastic and play. I made a little montage of Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden. I shared this on Instagram. We shared part of it in our episode on Wednesday. I just want folks who maybe haven't seen these yet to see, like, it is the epitome, I think, of Christian nationalism, because they opened up the rally with a prayer. And the prayer is all about integrity and hope and faith. So what I did was I took part of that prayer, and then I just played some excerpts from the 6-hour rally of things that were said and were cheered on by the crowd.
6 hours?
6 hours.
Jeez. That's 2 Lord of the Ring movies.
I know. And honestly, I'd rather watch those all day than watch this again. So anyway, here's this. I'm pulling this from our New Evangelicals Instagram account. So if you're watching it, I'm pulling the reel. If you're listening to it, you're going to hear me kind of come in with my own Dan McClellan attempt. All right, let's see it kind of vibe. And here's a little montage of how it started and how it ended. Here we go.
This great land was built on the foundations of faith, hope, and love. May we strive to embody these values, shining your light in our communities and beyond.
All right, let's see it.
Her and her pimp handlers will destroy our country.
Ukraine versus Russia, Israel, it's like bad soccer games. Who even cares?
Are you ready to make history tonight and make some liberals cry?
What a sick son of a bitch. The whole fucking party, a bunch of degenerates, lowlives, Jew haters, and lowlives.
I watched him just totally decapitate a fake reporter.
She is the devil, whoever screamed that out. She is the Antichrist, and the Palestinians are taught to kill us at 2 years old.
She is grossly incompetent. All you have to do is look at her.
There's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah, I think it's called Puerto Rico.
It's going to be pretty hard to look at us and say, you know what? Kamala Harris, she got 85 million votes because she's just so impressive. As the first Samoan, Malaysian, low IQ, former California prosecutor ever to be elected president.
I'm a good person. All we want to do is straighten out our country.
There you go. There you go.
Yikes.
I don't know. I still don't know. And I talked about this on Wednesday's episode. I just don't know how you pray these prayers to God and claim a Christian theology and ethics and a quote unquote biblical worldview, and then sit there for 6 hours and cheer it on and applaud and think, wow, this is it. Like this is the way of Christ. It truly baffles me. And obviously this comedian, Tony Hinchcliffe, I think his name is. He's getting a lot of flack for his comments. And by the way, the ones that we played, there are several other jokes that he made that were racist and just really like vulgar. Again, all laughed at by these people.
And there was one joke that the Trump campaign took out that said, no, you can't say that, because he was going to call Kamala the C word. And they told him, don't say that.
Is that confirmed?
I saw that as well.
Is? Okay. Yeah, I mean, it really is like, it is just shocking, again, the level of dehumanization, right, that gets hurled from these spaces in the name of biblical worldview and biblical values. I do want to point out, though, that one of the responses I'm seeing from right-wing people is that, well, Tony in particular was just telling jokes. These were just jokes, you know. Now, Tony Hinchcliffe is a roast comic, so he'll go to, people's roasts and just, destroy them. But one of the differences between what Tony did at this political rally and being a roast comic is that when you go to someone's roast, they're all there consensually. Like, when he did Tom Brady's roast, they all knew what they were signing up for, right? Everyone on that stage was saying, permission given just to kind of say the things that you can't say publicly, right? That's so different than going to a political rally, opening up the rally. I think he was the first or second speaker, and actually reinforcing all of the tropes that these people already believe. Of course, most people think that other countries, especially ones that sound, Latino, like Puerto Rico, right? I mean, technically, Puerto Rico is not a different country, but people in that crowd think it is, right? Oh, of course, it's a pile of garbage. Of course, we're going to make fun of black people and make terrible vulgar jokes about Mexicans who come into the border and compare that to how many children that they have in a really gross way. That's why it's not funny. Like, there's no joke there when your group is actually repeating so many of those stereotypes throughout the campaign run by their presidential nominee.
Well, and also, like, a good comedy punches up.
Yeah.
Doesn't punch down. And their whole entire, they were punching down to some of the most marginalized groups of people in the world, not just in America.
100%. 100%. And it drives me absolutely bonkers that, that we are in this space where it's like, how is this okay? And then watching right-wing people defend it who are also Christians or really excuse it is mind-blowing. I mean, I have some of the tweets. Do you want to show some of them, April, and kind of go through them?
Let's go through them.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. We can start. You want to start with Allie Stuckey?
Yeah, well, this kind of go.
Let's go to this one.
Yeah, so Allie Beth Stuckey, who we've discussed before, she tweeted, "How can I still vote for Trump as a Christian after the NYC rally? Easy. I find the unbridled celebration of baby murder seen at Harris's rallies as far more vulgar than off-color jokes about Puerto Rico. Offensive words won't destroy our country. Bad policy will." This is it's so annoying how they like to paint Democrats as people that celebrate abortion. Like we throw abortion parties or something. Like, that just doesn't happen.
100%. Yeah, and again, like, where is this unbridled celebration of baby murder happening at these rallies? Like, Allie is, again, one of these people that's just so disingenuous. And to say this, to really make it seem like one party is celebrating the slaughter of children, while the other one just made a few, off-color jokes. It's like, what worldview are you? How? I mean, Allie, if you want to be consistent, what I think would be more accurate would be for her to say, "I find the unbridled toleration of babies being murdered in Palestine far more vulgar than off-color jokes." Okay, yeah, okay, I can understand that, right? Because that's, I think, a very valid critique of the Harris administration. Not that Trump would be any better. But to tie it back to abortion, especially given that Trump does not care about pro-life or pro-choice policies. He does not care. His own wife is obviously very pro-choice, it's clear what he's doing. For Ali to really make it seem like one party is just celebrating mass baby murder and the other one is not. It's just like,
which we have already established too, that abortion rates actually go down under Democrats.
Yes, they go down. And look at if people want data like in real time, look at Texas. They have insane draconian abortion bans, infant mortality rates and maternal mortality rates per 100,000 people have gone up, not down. It does not work. These bans do not work. They only hurt people. And it's very frustrating to witness. So anyway, yeah. I don't know. I'm over it. Yeah.
I was just going to say between 2019 and 2022, which is when the bans really went into effect in Texas.
Yeah.
They saw a 56% increase in maternal deaths.
Wow.
So
that's unbelievable.
That is not a pro-life position.
No, it's obviously not, but it doesn't matter to Ali. Again, it's just so much propaganda. Then we have this one from Matt Walsh, another great Christian man, claims the Catholic tradition as his way of living morally and ethically through the world. He tweeted out, "Trump is the only politician who would put a real comedian on stage at his rally and let him tell jokes that are actually funny and edgy. Smart strategy, too. The Dems will now spend the next 3 days crying over politically incorrect jokes. That's exactly the kind of school marm bullshit that killed them in 2016. Why? Like, why, Matt? Why is this the hill you want to die on? Like, again, as a Christian, does the Christian tradition guide our highest ideals? Peace, joy, patience, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness. Where are these ethics manifest anywhere in this comedian's routine?
Yeah.
They're not. But Matt is so beholden to his far-right ideology. This is the same man, by the way, who praises colonization, thinks it's a great net good for society, right? For him, this is a great move. This is edgy and funny and hilarious, and the Dems are just a bunch of babies. How, Matt? Like, what are we talking about here? All I care about for these people who claim to be Christians, I just want to know what ethic is really guiding them. Like, if you want to sound like a butthole, I'll be filtered today. If you want to operate like that throughout the world, that's fine. Just don't call it faithful to the way of Jesus. That's all I ask you to do, is just stop claiming the Christian tradition as your moral framework and justification, because this ain't it. It's just not it.
But then they'll turn around and just say there's no way that we could be Christian.
I know, April.
Because we vote for Harris or whatever the reason. Do you want to play Trump's response to the comedian?
Okay, yes. Let's do that, and then we're going to play Joe Biden's comments the other day, because we got to talk about that too. I hate it here. My computer sucks. I can barely see you guys. I hate these comments.
I will say we're a little clearer in the smaller box.
Yeah, because you're tiny. All right, let me get this moving here. Here we go. So Trump Trump and the Trump team put on the 6-hour-long rally. You already heard the montage. Sean Hannity, who is a fair and balanced journalist, of course, wants to ask Trump about the comments made by the comedian about Puerto Rico. Here's Trump's response.
So you have this big event at Madison Square Garden. It went on for hours. I don't even know if you were there for the whole thing. I don't know what time you got there. I was told and made aware that you had no idea about this comedian who made comments.
I have no idea who he is. Somebody said there was a comedian that joked about Puerto Rico or something, and I have no idea who he is. Never saw him, never heard of him, and don't want to hear of him. But I have no idea. They put a comedian in, which everybody does. You throw comedians in. You don't vet them and go crazy. It's nobody's fault. But somebody said some bad things. Now, what they've done is taken somebody that has nothing to do with the party, has nothing to do with us, said something, and they try and make a big deal. But I don't know who it is. I don't even know who put him in. And I can't imagine it's a big deal. I've done more for Puerto Rico than any president, I think, that's ever been president.
How is this man the champion of white evangelical Christians? How do you hear that and think, man, that's personal responsibility? Man, that guy really embraces repentance. Wow, also, that guy's humble. How?
It's the exact same language that he's used about Project 2025 too. Almost verbatim. I've never heard of it.
Why is this deflection? Andrew, can you help us out here? Like, what are your thoughts? Do you want to rant into the ether here? Because I can't rant anymore. I'm too frustrated.
I mean, I don't know if there's anything more really to be said. Like,
probably right.
Yeah, I mean, just some of what we've just continued to look at with on these podcasts with religion and politics in this moment. Anybody that promises power, it doesn't matter, right? Like whether personally he's religious, ethical, aligns, or whatever. It is all about power, and so. Yeah, they went all in 2016 and have stayed committed, and there's just no change and no going back. And yeah, that's the reality.
Andrew, I'm curious for you because you and I kind of have a similar tradition. We were kind of raised more in that conservative evangelical world. And, on Wednesday, I just kind of shared my heart on my frustration and also bewilderment still of how this tradition can really use the word truth so often and insist that they're standing on it when it's so obvious that they stand on so many lies. Like objectively, we can verify, fact check, not true. Or they embrace someone who, again, takes no personal responsibility for his actions. I mean, don't forget that comedian, Tony, did that in front of a Trump Vance for President sign at a Trump Vance rally, the last one in Madison Square Garden. For Trump to be like, oh, no big deal. I don't know who he is. I had nothing to do with it. My team, who needs to vet people?
Also, just saying the fact that everyone just throws comedians in without vetting them. No, they don't.
We know that's a lie because to your point, April, Tony wanted to say an even more vulgar joke, and the Trump team killed it. People know that they have teleprompters, right? And you have to load your script into a teleprompter, and someone has to read that and approve it. Obviously. But again, for white evangelicals, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you're right. It's not Trump's fault. I don't understand, Andrew. I don't freaking get it.
I won't be able to help or make you understand right today. It is. I mean, it's difficult. There's so much going on with, and it's decades in the making. And Trump is I think the final natural outcome of a lot of those choices and choices that were made regarding politics on the right and evangelical Christianity. And so here we are.
Yeah. I do think part of the mindset. Did I say this on the last recap that Trump is a mega pastor, like a megachurch pastor? Because one, how many megachurch pastors do you know that love to inflate numbers of them? Like, we had 5,000 people that were saved, and they're all about numbers and how many people, how big their crowds were. And then also the whole idea that we are taught when you are in evangelical spaces, do not touch God's anointed. And how many people, when pastors fall under scandals, they just defend their pastor because they're taught not to ever touch God's anointed. And Trump is their new anointed, whether they realize that or not. So Trump can do no wrong, and they have to defend. Because it is so similar to a megachurch pastor, just on a very large scale.
That tracks. I mean, it makes sense, in my opinion. It absolutely does. I mean, when you're kind of conditioned from the beginning to look at one man as your spiritual and moral leader to direct how you're supposed to see the world, it makes sense how this could happen with Trump, even though, it depends. I guess it depends in what church context, but Trump would be disqualified by 95% of churches worldwide to be a pastor, unless maybe it was a megachurch pastor. I don't know. But then they would say, but guys, Trump isn't claiming to be a pastor-in-chief. He's a commander-in-chief, which is where the rhetoric comes back in to reinforce what Scott Coley calls legitimizing narratives, yada, 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 and here we are.
But they say the same thing about pastors who fall from grace. Nobody's perfect. We're all just human.
100%.
It's not consistent. They defend who their people are. But then if the other side, in their mind, the enemy, quote unquote, says anything like garbage, they lose their minds. Yeah.
Let's play this clip because President Biden did say something that I think is pretty not great. And I already hear the Democratic or the Democrat supporters, no, Tim, he's taken out of context, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to play the 16-second clip. You, audience, can make your own determination, and I'll kind of give some commentary on this. So President Biden heard that Puerto Rico jab and denigration about the territory, right, is what you would call it. Is that correct? Even I don't know
it's a U.S. I think it's a U.S. territory.
Yeah, U.S. territory. That's what I thought. Okay. Anyway, so here's Biden responding to that on a call. Here we go.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American.
Okay. So that's the clip that kind of went around. And
he very quickly tweeted out and posted everywhere that he just meant to say that his supporters' dehumanization was garbage.
Right. And then the White House transcript added an apostrophe on supporters, trying to make it seem like maybe Biden was talking about Tony Hinchcliffe directly as, one of Trump's supporters. Look, I feel an ethical obligation to be consistent with my own rhetoric that I employ, and what we often say here is that impact matters more than intent. So regardless of what Biden or President Biden intended, that's not a great look. And it is, in my opinion, dehumanization. I mean, we don't call people garbage. I don't care who they are. So I was not a huge fan of that comment. And I'm not going to buy the defense that I've been seeing, that I've seen being employed by the White House or even President Biden supporters. I just think it's uncalled for.
I do find it a little ironic that I repented a couple weeks ago because I called Trump trash.
Yeah.
It's very similar. So Joe Biden, it happens to the best of us. But I agree with you. It was uncalled for. But the way...
Go ahead. Say it.
The way that the MAGA movement has responded to this, he said the absolute worst thing you could ever say, which I agree, it wasn't good. He should he apologized. He backtracked, as one should.
Right.
Trump's never backtracked.
Never.
Trump has never apologized for anything he said. And he has said far, 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 far worse things. He has painted all Democrats as the enemy from within, like enemies of the United States. Fellow Americans.
It is the quintessential, the pot calling the kettle black. Only the pot is like 10 shades darker than whatever it's calling black. You know what I mean? Like what? Here's what I don't get. For almost a decade now, and Andrew, I would love you to kind of chime in here. For almost a decade now, we've heard nonstop dehumanization of Democrats. I mean, again, friends, listen to the montage, right? They're effing this. They're sick. They're demented. Trump calls people the enemy from within, right? Immigrants who are here legally are eating the cats and dogs and their low lives. All of this gross rhetoric we've heard for decades. And for almost a decade. And since the beginning, the right-wing media machine, your Matt Walsh's, your Ali Stuckey's, whoever else, as we saw earlier, will defend or downplay what's actually said either as part of the MAGA movement or by Trump himself. Now, President Biden, I followed his stuff for the past 4 years because it's part of our job is to track what he's saying. Overall, a pretty calm demeanor. Hasn't really said a whole lot of things I'm like, whoa, that's really intense. This is probably the most intense thing I've ever heard him say in 4 years. And by the way, to be clear, it's dehumanizing and it's wrong, and I reject it, right? I would tell President Biden, no, people are not garbage. Absolutely not. However, to take that as MAGA supporters like Charlie Kirk and Megan Basham be like, look at the vile, terrible rhetoric from Biden. He hates half the country. Can you believe the indecency of this president? It is like my brain, it might literally come out of my ears and just melt into the floor. Like you're joking, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't call this dehumanization. It is, but you have not a pinky toe to stand on when it comes to, right, dehumanization and vulgar rhetoric being espoused by any president, former or current.
Also, they just, and I want to let Andrew speak too.
Yeah, I know. Poor Andrew. It's just like waiting
No.
They've spent the last 4 years talking about how Joe Biden is senile and can't form a sentence, and that like you can't take anything he says seriously because he's so old.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, no, he meant that. He knew exactly what he was saying.
And not only that, he hates half the country. He hates half. Like,
right, and he's actually, if you listen to his rhetoric, he's usually speaking about unifying and is always try to welcome Trump supporters into their tent.
It was one of his campaigns. He said that he's a president for everyone, right? I mean, again, I'm not trying to defend what Biden said. What he said, in my opinion, is indefensible. I don't care if you want to put an apostrophe after the S or not. I do not give a damn. That's bad rhetoric. I reject it. But to make it seem like this is the pattern of Biden from people who just sat at that rally and defended it, it's like you have got to be kidding, right? Like, again, where is there any moral integrity left in your veins at all? Look in the mirror. I'll tell you what. Since they're Christians and the Bible is clear, I will quote the Bible to hopefully get through. Take the plank out of your own eye before you take the speck out of your brother's eye. Okay, does that make sense? You know, like that big tree you got sticking out of your eyeball. Get rid of that thing first, and
gotta
then
be uncomfortable. That's probably why they're so mad.
Probably, and then get rid of that little piece of sawdust out of your brother's eye. Okay, maybe that will convince people to just look in the damn mirror before you actually claim that Biden is the most divisive president in history, while you campaign and rally for a guy who literally had that shit at his rally and then doesn't even take accountability for his actions, but deflects. Miss me with that. Preach. Andrew, it's over to you.
Nothing to add. Yeah.
But you know what? We should be respectful of Andrew's time, though.
Because, we should. Poor guy.
And let's go to the stuff that he brought to share with us.
He did. Yes, Andrew. Let's go over to our Christian Nationalist corner. I feel like we need some kind of jingle. You know, like. I'm not even going to try. I'd be too embarrassed. And we've had to stop recording 3 times to make this video work. So I'm just trying to salvage whatever we can. It's working great.
Working. Whatever you did last, Tim.
I restarted my router, which means it's on me, April.
Wow. You should repent for that.
I'm going to. I will repent right now. I'm so sorry. It turns out I think it's on my end, not on April's end.
It's me.
So Andrew, talk to me. I asked you to kind of break down. There's a new study done by PRI, our friend Robbie Jones over there doing great work. And he posted an article why he's really concerned about this election and with what's going on in right-wing spaces. Break it down for us.
Yeah. So this past year, they did another research, a survey of the American public, and then published a research report. I think Tim will post it for people to find it, but it's looking at the connection between authoritarianism and Christian nationalism. So this is a story that we've been telling since, the mid, 2010s. And, in our first book, looking at the authoritarian cultural element of Christian nationalism. So that is a key part of it. This desire for seeing the world as a chaotic place. We need a strong ruler to come in with strong rules to enforce order. And the order we want is, a traditionalist social hierarchy, strong ethno-racial boundaries around who gets to come in, who gets to be truly American, all of these things. So this is supported by almost, a decade of research and empirical evidence now. But the PRI survey helps to kind of continue to build this out. Now, I think this is helpful for us because as we move into the election or as we look at Madison Square Garden, we see the rhetoric and evidence, right, that has been there for a while of an embrace of authoritarian social control by the GOP, especially by Trump, his supporters, whether it was in the first administration or as he's running for president now. And so with PRI, I think it helps take into account, right, what we see politically, but then to give us an idea of across the U.S. when we're looking at a survey of the American public, what do people think, believe, and what does this mean for us? Yeah. And so I think the empirical data helps kind of bring, take what we saw at Madison Square Garden, some of the sexism, some of the xenophobia, some of the racism, and look in the mirror. It helps us look in the mirror, right, at America and see that this isn't just isolated. It's not just the people that were there, but it is something that, is a part of this framework of Christian nationalism. So, we can kind of run through some of the figures from this report, and then folks can go and read it. But let's look at, this first one is looking at the overlap between Christian nationalism, and then they gather data on using two different measures of authoritarianism. One is called the right-wing authoritarianism scale. So this is something that's been around for like 50 years. And so it uses some questions to look at, okay, do the people that agree with these, do they really have this kind of authoritarian streak in them? The other one is a child rearing scale, because this is another way you can kind of sense if there's an authoritarian streak, right? What do they believe about raising children, right? Do we spank? Do you need really strong rules? So these are two different measures in the literature over a number of decades that people use to measure authoritarianism.
Can I ask you a quick question before we keep going? Could you just give, for anyone who's new here or maybe tuning in for the first time, two things? Can you give a brief definition of Christian nationalism, as you always do? Yeah. And can you also give us a brief definition of authoritarian? Because I think that word gets thrown around a lot. I'm not exactly sure what we're talking about sometimes.
Yeah, so Christian nationalism, we define empirically as a cultural framework, and that just means a collection of narratives, myths, value systems, basically like a lens through which we see and interpret our social worlds. Right. So Christian nationalism is a cultural framework that advocates for a very particular type of Christianity to be closely fused with American civic life, and that the government should defend and preserve this particular expression of Christianity with American civic life, that this should be central to how we see our nation. And with that cultural framework, it includes a comfort with authoritarian social control, strict traditionalist hierarchy, ethno-racial boundaries, and a kind of populism and conspiratorial thinking. So all those things are kind of a package deal within Christian nationalism. Okay. When we're talking about authoritarianism, and again, authoritarianism is a cultural element of Christian nationalism, but what we find in the research is that they're not one and the same, which means if you include Christian nationalism and a measure of authoritarianism in a statistical model, they don't cancel each other out, right? If they canceled each other out, then you're just measuring the same thing, and that's not what we find.
I see.
Yeah.
Got it.
So they're related, but they are distinct. And so authoritarianism is this desire to essentially see kind of strong man or strong people, but generally it's gendered men, but to see this kind of strong man take control, right? We need to have strong rules, strong rulers. This is how society, families, schools, basically any organization, this is how it should function. Needs strong rules, needs strong rulers, black and white. So that's a sense of what authoritarianism is overall.
Okay, that's helpful. And to be clear, what you're not saying is that having rules or boundaries for anything is inherently authoritarian. You're talking about a very specific way of seeing how rules and black and white binaries function to maintain certain maybe social hierarchies, gendered hierarchies, racial hierarchies, etc. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Okay. So really quick too, as we measure authoritarianism, these are some of the questions that PRRI asked. Okay. So the only way our country can get through the crisis ahead is to get back to our traditional values, put some tough leaders in power, and silence the troublemakers from spreading bad ideas. Or our country will be destroyed someday if we do not smash the perversions eating away at our moral fiber and traditional beliefs. Okay. We need a country that needs a strong, determined leader who will crush evil and take us back to the true path. Okay. So this doesn't just have to do with, this just doesn't have to do with like, hey, have boundaries with your children or whatever. Right.
Hey,
which is
parent
healthy.
Your children, authoritarian. No, we're not talking about that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a very strong view. So
I just want to be clear about that, because so many people, especially when they talk to me privately who don't like me, they always try to misrepresent like what we're talking about. And I always try and say, guys, we bring you leading literal scholars on this stuff to help break it down and understand exactly what we're talking about. So that's why I'm so glad that we have you on at the end of every month, because having access to you and having your data and also your interpretation and really translation of what we're talking about is really helpful, so people know exactly what it is that this poll or this data set is measuring compared to what it's not measuring.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
So this first figure is just kind of looking at the overlap between all of these. And so that top line is all Americans. And so it's showing that as we measure Christian nationalism, 30% are at least adherents or sympathizers of Christian nationalism. So about a third of Americans have at least a sympathetic view towards Christian nationalism. When we look at the right-wing authoritarianism scale or the child-rearing authoritarianism scale, you see that around 43, 41%, so a little bit more, when we're looking at all Americans, kind of hold views that at least are high or very high on this authoritarianism scale. Now, the other lines, and then you can see they kind of overlap with each other. If you look at that first column of Christian nationalism and then go straight down, that's looking at this and saying, and it shows, around 51% of those that are at least sympathetic to Christian nationalism, right, are very high in authoritarianism scale, or 44% when we're looking at the child rearing scale. And so what this is showing us is that there is overlap, right? It's not one and the same, but they're definitely correlated, right? People that embrace Christian nationalism tend to be a little more authoritarian overall. And then when we look at the next two columns, those that are, score high on the right-wing authoritarianism scale, the majority qualify the majority of the right-wing authoritarian scale in the row, the majority, 51%, are sympathetic in the column there. Or for the child rearing, 44% are at least sympathetic. And if you look at the Christian nationalism row, I had that backwards before, and you go across, 74% of those folks score very high on authoritarianism, or 61% on the child rearing. So what this is showing us is that people that embrace Christian nationalism, the majority do kind of hold these authoritarian views. So there is a significant overlap here.
So that makes sense then why we see Trump say what he says, right? About how he's their justice, how he's their retribution, how he's the one who will save the country, he's going to clean it up, he's going to get rid of the enemy from within, etc.
Yeah, definitely.
And because sorry to interrupt you, I just want to translate. Because of these authoritarian tendencies, again, they're not one of the same, but the tendencies, it's easy for people in the Christian nationalism space to be okay with getting rid of democratic norms and oppositional views for the sake of, we have to save the country from falling off, or from falling into the abyss of disaster, essentially. Is that kind of like the logic here?
Yeah, that is the logic, right? So if we, hold on to this narrative that the United States is God's anointed country and it has fallen off track, and the only way to get it back is to take control and make sure that it abides by these particular, again, that particular expression of Christianity, these beliefs that we say are central and that God wants. Who are we to stand in the way, right? Why would we limit what we believe God, the God of the universe, has told us to do, just because of democracy or trying to work together with other folks in different views of the country? So then it becomes very easy to set aside, democratic norms and values, and that's what we're looking at. So then if we go on in this next figure, this is some of the implications, right? So we talk about setting aside democratic values or supporting a strongman authoritarian leader. Right. So with these different colored dots at the top, this is essentially the percent of people across these different scales who agree that if Donald Trump isn't confirmed the winner of the 2024 election, he should just declare the results invalid and do whatever it takes to assume his rightful place as president. When we look at all Americans, about 14% agree with that.
Wow.
But if you look at
scary, honestly, that's like 30 million people. I mean, right? Roughly, give or take.
Yeah, but when you look at Christian nationalism and those that are at least sympathetic to it, 28% agree with that. So that's double the number of all Americans, right? So within Christian nationalism, there's minority support, but it's double the level of all Americans who would say should just do whatever it takes. Or if we look at the green dot, the people convicted for their role in January 6th, those people are just being held hostage by the government. Again, double the number of Christian nationalists or sympathizers, at least, to all Americans. Or Democrats have weaponized the Department of Justice to silence Donald Trump. Again, almost double when we compare it to all Americans. So there is this underlying sense of we need authoritarian leaders, and Donald Trump is that leader.
Wow.
The next figure just kind of further underscores this point of saying that we need a strong ruler, right? We need a strong leader to come in, and we're willing to set aside some of these democratic values in order to get the right person in power, and that person is Donald Trump. And so we want America to be a promised land, for European Christians, or God wants us to take control of society, the Seven Mountains Mandate, or the final battle between good and evil is upon us, and Christians should stand firm, right? So
8 out of 10 Christian nationalists, adherents, and sympathizers believe that.
Yeah, so this is upping the stakes, right? So when we hear rhetoric at Madison Square Garden or elsewhere saying that the enemy is within, or people that don't support Trump are the enemy, right? It's looking at Americans or Democrats or independents, anybody that isn't on board, as the enemy. They see it as a battle between good and evil. And at that point, the stakes are unimaginably high, right? There's no coming back from that when you view this as kind of the last final battle.
Wow. I mean, I almost feel like this is like for them, Avengers Endgame level, right? Like this is the final battle against Thanos, like for the rest of the world, essentially, is how they view it.
Yeah. Well, and if you scroll through, I mean, for those that are still on Facebook, but like you get on Facebook and you look, I mean, for me, looking at folks I went to high school with, and I'm not super old, but 42 years old, it wasn't that long ago, but like you see over and over the rhetoric of, wow, this is amazing. We're in the end times, y'all. Like it's going to happen. Like just keep your eyes open, your ears open. Like this is coming. Wow. And it's just like, wow, okay, incredible. This is real. So yeah, as we look at that, and I encourage people to take a look at the report. There's more findings.
A bunch here.
Run through them really quickly. Like again, with the xenophobia and anti-immigrant stance, we see with Christian nationalism, those that are sympathetic towards it, they're much less likely to say immigrants are generally good for the economy, even though a majority of Americans believe that. They're more likely to believe immigrants increase crime rates, even though there's no data that supports that.
Right.
And more likely to believe that growing numbers of newcomers burden local communities, even though those communities tend to not say that either.
But we think about, again, Springfield, Ohio, right? The governor of Ohio is like, no, we asked them to come to help out our economy in Springfield. And J.D. Vance is like, they're eating the dogs. It's like, wow. Like, two very, and by the way, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
No, even the religious leaders in that town were like, some of our churches would close if it weren't for our Haitian neighbors who are a higher likelihood of being Christian. So it isn't about religion.
Right.
It's about skin color and nativity.
Wow.
And so, this is also looking at immigration beliefs, where those that embrace Christian nationalism are much more likely to believe that immigrants are invading our country, that they're here illegally, even support for setting up encampments guarded by the U.S. military. That harkens back to Japanese internment in the 1940s. Or that they're entering our country illegally and poisoning the blood of our country. So just really xenophobic, anti-immigrant beliefs. And then the last one I think I sent, and there's more in the report, I encourage people to take a look, but it's really looking at kind of more patriarchal views and sexism overall, which again, we saw at Madison Square Garden. But Christian nationalism is associated with those.
I mean, Trump has said that he wants to use the 18th century Aliens Enemies Act for mass deportations, which was the last time that was used was to put Japanese people in internment camps. People often say like, oh, like these comparisons to, what happened in Germany are so far-fetched. Like, are they really? I mean, again, we're just reading and listening to what he and his world of supporters and inside men are saying about immigrants. And like, that should absolutely send some shivers down our spine. Unfortunately, though, Andrew and April, we both know that America has had this problem for a long time. I mean, one book I think is so important to read is Fever in the Heartland, that talks about the KKK in the 1920s. A lot of it's the same rhetoric about immigrants, although it's aimed at at different people than it is today. But the notion of immigrants are ruining America has been deeply embedded in the the right Protestant psyche for over 100 years now.
Yeah, for centuries. And two, I think this data, the rhetoric obviously matters and is huge at that level, but then the data shows that it resonates with millions of Americans, right? And so we see experts in fascism that have studied it their whole career saying, listen, we knew with Trump, with what he was saying, it was always kind of fascist and authoritarian, but really what should worry us is that the millions of Americans, even if he loses, they're still with us. Like this is still an issue. So how do we find a way forward there? How do we find a way to not look at our neighbors and think these are our blood sworn enemies just because they vote differently than us?
Right.
And there isn't political polarization with that. That's only happening on one side. That isn't happening across the spectrum. And so we have to be real with that as well.
It does seem like just so many MAGA people that have just really are all in on Trump don't live in reality. Like they don't, like I know so many people that genuinely believe the 2020 election was stolen. And so they almost feel this righteous anger, which is ironic because now, they're talking about, Trump should do whatever it takes to make sure he wins, which would be cheating and stealing an election. It's like all projection. The thing that they fear, that they believe the Democrats have done, they are willing to do, even though their whole perspective is based on a complete lie that the Trump campaign pushed in 2020.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why, when we look at Christian nationalism, one of the central idols is fear and sense of threat, because that draws strong boundary lines around our group, and we have to defend ourselves at any cost. And a friend and colleague of mine, Paul Jupe, he's a political scientist. He's got this great kind of turn of phrase, but empirically supported, where he calls it the inverse golden rule. And do unto others as you fear they might do unto you. And so the religious right kind of operates under this principle that whatever you fear them or they might do to us, kind of do that right at the outset. And it really operates in the way that you highlight there, April. Like it's, like we need to do away with democracy because we fear that they're going to oppress us. And so we will oppress whoever else. We will silence their voices. So.
Andrew, before we let you go, and again, thanks for bringing this expertise to us. It's so enlightening and helpful, especially for content creators like me and April. Whenever we talk about this stuff, I just feel like I'm able to speak about it so much more articulately and informed because of your work. Also, I think April froze. That's definitely not on me. Just so we're clear. I think she looks drunk in that picture. It's hilarious. But my question I was going to ask you is, no matter what, I mean, obviously, I'm not sure if we're even going to know by this time next week who the clear winner is. I mean, it seems like all the polling, it seems like it says it's neck and neck. Regardless, though, what do you think is the mandate for the Christian? I want to bring it back to that because for us as new evangelicals, like I always say, our allegiance has to be first and foremost to the way of Jesus over anything else. Sharon McMahon, a friend of mine, says it's always principle over party. And I love that because I agree. I want to stand on principle. I don't want to stand because my party says we'll change your mind on this, right? Regardless of what happens next week, how do you think about the role of us as Christians who are trying to expose this really dangerous ideology taking off in some of these spaces? Like, how do we resist it? What do we do about it, no matter what, or maybe we think about the better path forward. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot just because it is a time where you do feel anxiety, you feel in some sense powerless, right? Like what can we do? Well, like we can go vote, we need to participate. But I think no matter the outcome, I do think it's important for Christians to recognize reality and the threats that are there, but then to not give in to cynicism or hopelessness, because we can do something. We have agency. I think when we think that agency now has gone, I think that's when it truly gets dark. But we can do something. We can resist, and we can take care of each other. And so I try to tell folks, when I speak at different places, do what you can, where you can, however you can, right? Mm-hmm. And it's different for all of us. You all have incredible platforms. You're able to speak to large groups of people, and you can continue to do what you can, where you can. There may be a moment where you have to do less, or you may be given an opportunity to do more, and then do what you can in those moments. And there's times where I can do more. There's times where I have to step away. And that's okay, because there are other folks that can step in. So it isn't up to us individually, but together, I do think in the history of the world, right, or in the history of God and humans, as reflected in the stories in the Bible and different things, like there's always oppression. There's always something that God's people are pushing back against and trying to push towards flourishing, because God is doing work, right? And the kingdom of God, we believe as Christians, is not subject to nations or empires, but flourishes on the margins, in the dark places, in the light places, wherever, and we can be a part of that. And so for me, I get hope when I think of folks that were enslaved in this country, that knew they were never going to see freedom, but they still did what they could wherever they were to try and move forward to that day when their ancestors would be free. Yeah. And if they can do that, then I can do what I can in this moment, whatever that might be. And again, that can change, but we can do that. And so I try to draw hope from that, no matter the outcome of next Tuesday.
And I kind of like even just ending on that note. It's just so good. I'm not even sure if we need to do tweets of the week and our normal routine, just because it just feels like a very different kind of episode given the precipice that we're on. I mean, April, I'm kind of curious for your thoughts too, like what you think about. I was asking Andrew while you were somewhere in the multiverse. I got
raptured.
Yeah, raptured. You came back. So glad you're here. Thank you. I was just asking Andrew, like, what do you think the call of the Christian is, no matter who wins next week? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
We got to keep doing what we're doing and being, radically inclusive and loving our neighbor, even when it's really hard. I find it hard right now to love people that are supporting Trump, that are constantly calling us demons and all of these things. But I am trying to learn to have grace, and I do think love wins in the end. Love will beat out the hate, and whatever may come, that movement's still not going anywhere regardless. If Kamala wins,
right,
there's still a lot of people that wanted Trump, and that mindset's not going anywhere, and Christian nationalism is not going anywhere either. I think we just keep on doing it, and there are more of us. There are just more of us. And we are not alone, and we will figure out whatever may come together.
One of the beautiful things of the deconstruction explosion is that we all found each other through it, and I think a lot of people have found new people to listen to or to help them navigate their journey. I mean, I found great podcasts like, Pete Enns, Bible for Normal People. I found Bradley Onishi's podcast, Straight White American Jesus, all these podcasts, right, that have just been so helpful in not only reimagining my theological understanding of what God is or could be, but also realizing what's happening in the tradition that radicalized me to be this Jesus person. And I think that no matter what happens next week, the call of us as Christians doesn't change. We love God and we love our neighbor as ourselves, right? And I'm really a big believer of the handshake between the two. I really believe that how we love God is demonstrated in our love for neighbor. And that's not qualified if they're legal or illegal, quote unquote, if they're straight or gay, if they're, heteronormative, or if they're transgender, if they're black, if they're white. The call isn't contingent on if they have the same political views that I do, right? I still have an obligation to love all of my neighbors. And I think that what I would hope for people listening to this is that they realize, and I used to say this back in my evangelical days, and it's funny, I still mean it with just very different implications, but if you are a Christian, you're in full-time ministry. That's what I used to say all the time. Like, there is, just because you're not paid to be on staff at a church doesn't mean that there isn't a call to represent Christ well to other people. And I think that's important for us to recognize. Like, if you're someone who listens to this show and you're all in on the Jesus thing like we are, you're in a full-time ministry position, quote unquote, right? To speak some evangelicalese there, of you have an obligation to always be modeling what the kingdom of God looks like on earth as it is in heaven. And I think that the strategies that we use and how we talk about that will look different depending on which administration gets in. Although at the same time, if Harris wins, I only feel more of an obligation to hold her feet to the fire when it comes to Palestine and other things. I think a lot of people are kind of like a little mum because they don't want to necessarily lose the election. But I think if Harris gets in, you're going to hear a really large outcry and probably see a lot of demonstrations around that issue and others. But I just hope that people don't feel super discouraged, but they use that fear as motivation to get active, right? They use that fear to get actively involved in their local town and their school board, to vote. If you're not registered to vote, you better freaking do it. I don't want to hear anything from people who do not vote.
It's too late now.
Is it too late? Is it?
Yeah.
You can't register to vote today?
I don't know. I know in Kentucky the deadline was a few weeks ago.
Okay, well, what do I know? Just go vote.
Well,
Please go vote.
Check your state.
Do whatever you can legally. Do whatever you can legally. Don't do anything fraudulent. Anyway, so I don't know. I feel like this is kind of a good note to end on, April. I'm not sure how you feel, but what else is there to really talk about? All we can do is see what happens and come back next week and give our thoughts.
Yeah, I think we all need to go outside, watch a sunset, breathe the air.
Yeah.
And the
Hug
sun will rise tomorrow. And we'll figure it out. We'll get through this.
Yeah. I'm happy to end on that note. That feels good.
Yeah.
All right.
I do.
All
cool.
right.
Cool.
And go vote.
Well, friends,
Dear God, vote.
Dear God, vote. Solidarity, we're with you. I promise we feel all the feelings that you do. We feel the anxiety. We feel the nervousness. Go vote. Make sure you vote. It's so important that you do that. We're going to come back, of course, next week. We'll help you navigate what we're seeing, what's going on. I appreciate all of you, by the way. I say it a lot, but just to be really clear, I appreciate everyone who follows the YouTube channel and us on Instagram and the podcast. It means a lot because without you, this work wouldn't really matter. I tell people like Andrew all the time, because Andrew's a scholar. It's not Andrew's job to learn how to go viral on Instagram. But I tell Andrew and people like you, right? I tell David Gushy this.
Still waiting to go viral.
Yeah. I say if you say something amazing and no one hears you, it does not matter what you said. And so I just want to say to the audience, thank you for being here, because you being here makes this worth it. It makes all the frustration of bad audio or video quality and my computer taking a shit. It makes it all worth it because you're here to listen. So it means a lot. We're with you all the way. We'll come back next week and talk to you. Enjoy your week.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, go vote. Vote.